very, a very good morning to all of you. I would like to very warmly welcome you to the open session on Innovating for the Green Deal. Within the next 45 minutes, we'll have the opportunity to discuss together with representatives of 4 knowledge and innovation communities of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, the role of innovation in achieving the ambitious objectives of the European Green Deal, and the contribution of the EIT and its knowledge and innovation communities in that regard, including by addressing the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Climate change and environmental degradation are amongst the key challenges and existential threats to Europe and the world as a whole. And the European Green Deal is the new growth strategy of the European Union, which will help Europe tackle these challenges by modernizing its economy and society and by reorienting them to a just and sustainable future. So, turning environmental challenges into opportunities for all will be essential in that process, and innovation will play a central role. It is clear that Europe needs to develop and deploy new technologies to maintain its competitive advantage and lead the action against climate change. And to this end, it will be important to bring together and support innovators and entrepreneurs to facilitate cooperation and collaboration across sectors and across borders. So next to the challenge posed by the climate transition is the need to reboot EU's economy after the COVID-19 crisis, given its huge impact and the negative consequences it has on our economy and society. And the European Union has powerful programs and instruments in place, as well as innovative governance to address the existing challenges. So the future multi-annual financial framework and the next generation EU fund will be vital to fight climate change and modernize our economy and society. Having innovation at the core of its mission and activities, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology and its knowledge and innovation communities will have a key role by contributing to the objectives of the European Green Deal and by supporting Europe in its post-COVID recovery. So the EIT and the KICs constitute the largest European innovation community, and they'll be instrumental in further boosting Europe's innovation capacity and tackling global societal challenges. By interlinking education, research, and innovation, the EIT and the KICs will continue supporting climate-targeted innovations, stimulating green businesses, and equipping the next generation of green innovators and entrepreneurs. As you probably know, earlier this year, the EIT launched the EIT Crisis Response Initiative as part of the EU collective effort to tackle the COVID-19 crisis. So 60 million euro of additional funding was mobilized to support innovators with ideas to tackle this unprecedented crisis. And with this funding, the KICs launched the support for innovation projects and entrepreneurs and innovators who came up with ideas to tackle the crisis, and supporting thus startups, scale-ups, and SMEs, which we know will have a crucial role for Europe in its economic recovery. So, as already announced, we have today representatives of 4 knowledge and innovation communities, and they come from the areas of climate, raw materials, food, and energy. Before we start our discussion and I give them the floor to see how they see their contribution to the European Green Deal and to the post-COVID recovery of Europe, let me inform all our participants that you can ask questions to our panelists. And you can do so by submitting your questions, accessing the R&I Days page in Slido and selecting Hub 9 EIT. So after the first round of questions I have for our panelists, we'll look at the questions that the audience has posed to them. So let me start by asking a question to Kirsten Dunlop, who is the CEO of the EIT Climate. And Kirsten has been the CEO of the Climate KICs since 2017, and she has impressive experience across various areas from arts to technologies and across various continents. Kirsten, tackling climate change is at the heart of the Green Deal, and this is also the core mission of the EIT Climate KIC. In 2019, the Climate KIC launched 8 deep demonstrations that are intended to act as test beds, experimenting with new approaches to system innovation. So how can this approach help delivering on the objectives of the Green Deal?
Thank you very much, Antoinetta. It's a pleasure to join this session today on such an important topic. I think I will start immediately by acknowledging that the COVID-19 crisis layered on top of the sets of concerns and priorities with respect to the Green Deal is a crisis that we are feeling the effects of immediately, and it foreshadows subsequent crises that we know we will face or risk facing as a result of climate change effects. And if there's one thing that COVID has taught us, it has shone a light on the need to recognize the nature, the systemic, interconnected nature of the challenges we face, and the critical importance of acting together and bringing together collaborative efforts across boundaries and across sectors and disciplines in order to act in more systemic ways. The EIT program has always been focused on interdisciplinary connections, on cross-pollination, and on ecosystems that have brought together, as you said, education, entrepreneurship, innovation, social change, and civic action. And at EIT Climate KIC, what we have done in the last couple of years, and particularly this year in the context of the crisis and the launch of the Green Deal, is to throw that into an accelerated prototyping, testing, and practical experience mode with these initiatives called deep demonstrations, which are concrete ways to design, to build, and to deliver mission-oriented portfolios of innovation that are connecting different initiatives in specific places within Europe, countries, whole cities, at national scale in some cases, at regional scale, and connecting those innovations in one place to the challenges of change and transformation and civil society engagement and participation that are there and real in those places, encouraging rapid testing of different approaches simultaneously, connecting them so that they can learn from one another, and identifying quickly feedback loops and inputs into policy development, into investment, and into scaling of new solution and support for decision-making and decision-makers who are looking at the outcomes of the innovation experience and need to work out how to take things forward. We have deep demonstrations operating in a number of different areas in Europe. I think there is a slide which can go up if it's there, just to give you a sense of the range of areas that we are applying this excuse me, systemic approach to support the deployment, development, and the deployment of research and innovation in interconnected ways around key challenges associated with the Green Deal and with COVID-19. Some of these areas are, for example, in the question of just transformations, looking to support democratic and inclusive transitions in regions that are still economically dependent on fossil fuels and polluting industries in, for example, Gipuzkoa in the Basque region, Emilia-Romagna in Italy, and in Silesia in Poland. We're working on some very ambitious and inspiring programs in circular economy at the level of whole countries with respect to Slovenia and in regions in Cantabria and in Italy. And we're working with a number of cities. And I'll pull out particularly, for example, we're working with 15 cities across Europe, some very large, some very small. And then we pull out, particularly in the context of COVID-19 and the impact, the city of Madrid deep demonstration, where in early July, to meet the challenges relating to the pandemic, 352 agreements were reached across all 5 political parties represented on the Madrid City Council to accelerate the work that EIT is supporting, representing stable, sustainable policy, in part to really accelerate environmental and sustainable mobility, adapting public spaces and parks, capitalizing on some of the forced changes that the pandemic had produced, accelerating urban regeneration, accelerating efforts in renewable energy, in rewilding, but also in policy innovation, pedestrianisation, bicycles, bus lanes, and financial innovation. And these measures have the potential to create hundreds of jobs, as well as a very much more resilient, healthy, and attractive city with a specific focus on citizen health, planetary health, and quality of life. And what we have done with the deep demonstrations within the EIT program is to create a vehicle for avoiding the fact that an enormous and unprecedented amount of public funding going into urgent need for economic recovery and rebuilding is not dispersed into a number of disconnected individual projects that are patterned into the sectors and silos in which they're normally produced, but are contained and connected and are able to learn from one another, thereby creating a vehicle for public investment to build back better in very systematic ways and very deliberately transparent ways linked to the impact of the Green Deal, of rapid decarbonisation, and the vehicle to blend in public to private finance. And that's where a lot of, say, the connection with the EIT's COVID recovery call this year and a number of the startups that have come through that call are then being plugged into the deep demonstrations for market building mechanisms right where jobs and new business creation is needed.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you for this very comprehensive presentation and the details of the wide range of activities and places you are covering under this deep demonstration. So let me now turn to Bernd Schäfer, who has been recently appointed the CEO of the EIT Raw Materials. Bernd, you're coming from the private sector and you have long years of experience with global companies in the field of raw materials. So can you please explain how the EIT Raw Materials mission corresponds to the EU Green Deal and and to the green transition? And can you give us some examples of innovation and support you've provided to companies? It will be also interesting to present your activities in the context of the recovery of Europe post-COVID-19 crisis. Bernd, over to you.
Okay, yeah, many thanks, Antoinetta, to your kind introduction. And thanks to EIT for having supported us in organizing this important panel discussion. And thanks to the previous speaker, my colleagues in other KICs for the kaleidoscope of perspectives you contributed on the issue. I'm glad to actively take part to the Research and Innovation Days today, and I believe to share with you how EIT Raw Materials contributes to the Green Deal is the best idea, while giving you some important figures on our response to COVID and providing an example of one best practice in the innovation we support. EIT Raw Materials is at the heart of the green transition. So first of all, I can say that the Green Deal is in EIT Raw Materials' DNA. As you can see by the visual in our slide that we have provided, EIT Raw Materials and raw materials are the drivers of the green and digital transition from linear to brown and circular green economy. Without lithium, cobalt, nickel or steel, electric vehicles would not move, windmills would not turn, and smartphones would not connect people. Looking at the close future, we see a clear challenge and also a partial disconnect in the raw materials supply-demand balance. By 2050, Europe expects to have 965 million electric passenger cars, 12,380 gigawatt battery storage, and 8,500 gigawatt solar photovoltaic capacity. EIT Raw Materials is at the heart of this transition. By addressing the whole value chain from mining, processing, up to circular economy, and I forgot to mention exploring, of course, EIT Raw Materials aims at securing a sustainable and resilient supply of raw materials by making Europe less vulnerable on import and more competitive. The EIT Raw Materials mission in this context is that Europe has to become a leading mineral and metals innovation and technology ecosystem. Our mission in there is driving and fostering innovation along the value chain with proven expertise and track record in bringing innovation to market. Our activities portfolio is based on three main pillars. It's innovation, business creation, and education. Due to the short time available today, I won't go into details across our core activities, innovations and investment cases supported. Rather, I wish to briefly introduce to you two success stories we have achieved, able to provide some concrete examples. The first one you can see in the slide is the company 3D Strong. So the 3D Strong logo, it's the story of a young Latvian startup that we have supported through our accelerator program. And the second case is about the result of our KIC that has been recently achieved within the last EIT COVID initiative. So on the top innovators supported by EIT Raw Materials, 3D Strong, why did we choose this company? 3D Strong, as you see there in the picture, the right colored picture, they produce special additives based on modified carbon nanotubes, which significantly increase mechanical strength and durability of metals, polymers, plastics. They add electrical conductivity, remove statics, and give unique properties to final products. It's a breakpoint in 3D printing and the additive manufacturing industry in a way of changing the use of technology from prototyping to real industrial manufacturing. The 3D Strong project has been received support from EIT Raw Materials within the Raw Materials Accelerator program. In phase 2 of the project, we will be focusing on growth, business coaching, and further support to implement the business strategy. Marina Petrushenko, CEO and co-founder, says that this is the best accelerator program in Europe for deep tech startups. We have participated in 4 or 5 other programs in the US, Slovenia, Latvia, and Germany, but EIT Raw Materials Accelerator program is absolutely the best. Another example I would like to highlight is the EIT Raw Materials COVID response. EIT has granted EIT Raw Materials almost 10 million to support more than 60 high potential ventures as part of the booster call in response to the COVID-19 crisis. This call will help mitigate the social and economic impact in an unprecedented and challenging time. The COVID-19 crisis surfaced the importance of raw materials and the implications to the industrial ecosystem. Together with the demand shocks, we have clearly seen that Europe is very strongly affected by raw material supply. This experience has made even more clear than ever before that the security of supply of raw materials needed for the long-term competitiveness and job security of key industry is of prime interest for the European Union, and EIT Raw Materials is using its extensive partner network consisting of major European industries and sectors to high relevance for green, digital and competitive Europe to evaluate strategic opportunities and secure raw material supply in Europe. With this, I would thank you very much and also give a short hint to the short-to-be-launched Raw Materials Alliance in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Indeed, by giving and presenting success stories, this is the best way to illustrate your activities, but also the response to the COVID crisis. And if we have time, it will be indeed interesting to learn more about your participation in the Alliance. But let me now turn to Andy. Andy Zinga is the CEO of the EIT Food KIC, and he has held various high positions in the area of innovation and has including academic experience in the field of innovation management. Andy, one of the key components of the Green Deal is the EU Farm to Fork strategy. It will be very interesting to hear from you what is the EIT Food doing to support the implementation of the strategy and what are the main challenges that the EIT Food KIC will be able to tackle. And of course, if you give this into the perspective of the response also to the post-COVID crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinetta, and hello to all participants and contributors to the R&I Days. We consider the Farm to Fork strategy of the EU an excellent set of recommendations and guidelines for the improvement of the food system. The intention, of course, is to accelerate the transition towards a more sustainable food system, which is exactly the mission that we at EIT Food have as well. Now, we accelerate this transition by bringing together the world's best minds from industry, education, research, and startups or scale-ups. Together, they identify the problems and develop solutions that get moved from idea to market quickly. All of this with the involvement of the buyers or consumers right at the center. So with everything that we do at this KIC, the consumer is important. Why? Well, food is a very emotional item. And of course, the world has several billions of food experts, and we might as well involve them in this process. Now, in accordance to the Farm to Fork strategy, it recommends to cut the use of chemical pesticides by 50% by 2030 and reduce the use of fertilizers by 20% by 2030. So those are strong and ambitious goals, and naturally, research and innovation is essential for this in order to achieve this. And the convening power that we as a KIC have at EIT Food will play a major role in this transition. Our current network of partners that we engage with on a regular basis consists of something like 170 world-class industrial partners, such as universities, research centers, startups, and scale-ups. And it covers all the stages of the value chain. And it is this network, plus all the additional partners that we bring in through open calls, that helps to deploy the solutions that help us to tackle all of the different farm to fork recommendations. Now, with our ecosystem, we are working on 6 particular focus areas that we think about all the time. And those are alternative proteins, sustainable agriculture, sustainable aquaculture, targeted nutrition, digital traceability, and circular food systems. In addition to this, there are 2 horizontal areas that support all of this, one of them being consumer centricity, which I mentioned already. That's a key to all of the things, everything that we do, as well as the digital transformation of the food system. Now, the COVID-19 crisis has placed an incredible pressure on both society and the economy, calling for more innovative thinking in order to face the challenges of this pandemic. If I may ask to please put the slide up that we provided for this. Yes. So our food system actually has proven to be more resilient than most people thought during the crisis. We did not experience major food shortages. Maybe there were some punctual, some in some points, but all in all, by and large, the food system is quite resilient. For this, we can partially thank, of course, the foresight of the Commission, the European Commission, who recognized that food is an essential sector for workers to attend to, so they were allowed to go to work, as well as the safety measures were kept, and also established green lanes that facilitated better logistical move through of food supplies through all of Europe. However, some parts of the food system are feeling greater pressure than others, right? So more specifically, the startup sector was on the verge of collapsing because of the lack of facility or access to them, as well as the absence of investors. So investors obviously were there, but they weren't actually investing at the time. So at the same time, we've seen the emergence of some new innovation themes and challenges that require specific interventions. So based, and Antoinetta mentioned that earlier already, based on the EU's collective efforts to tackle the COVID crisis, the EIT then launched the Crisis Response Initiative, which we at EIT Food then translated into 2 programs. One of them was a response call for innovation projects to help to accelerate anything that addresses business and consumer needs throughout the food system in Europe. And if you look on the slide, so the main themes were improved nutrition, food safety risks and supply chain disruption. Now, just to be clear, food safety risk has nothing to do with transmission of viruses through food. It's more about worker health and safety. So making sure that the workers, when they go to work in the industries that were deemed essential now during the crisis, can go to work and actually stay safe. So this is the focus on it. And the second one is the COVID-19 Bridge Fund to support startups and scale-ups that were under pressure from the crisis. So just to give you a couple of examples of things that we did do. So there's one project called COVID-19 Beam It Up. This one is a diagnostic platform to improve on-site testing of surfaces to see if the COVID virus is present. Again, very important in environments where there's food processing going on to protect the workers and make sure they don't get sick. This is a very international consortium across 4 or 5 countries with all the different players that I mentioned. We were able to do this call along with all the other KICs in record time. So within 6 weeks, we went from initial launch to selecting all the different projects and players. And this is, again, thanks to all the support we've received from both the Commission and the EIT. Lastly, and this is the last piece I will say now, is we also supported a good number of startups and scale-ups, namely 13 of them, that provide essential services and products that help the European Union to help in the transition of the food systems. And they were on the verge of collapse had it not been for the additional funds that we were able to provide thanks to the EIT Crisis Response Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for this very comprehensive presentation and the concrete examples. Let me now move to Elena Bow, who is the Innovation Director of the EIT Inner Energy and who has worked in this field for a long time for both private and public companies. Elena, the innovation ecosystem is an essential facet of Europe's future economy. But many startups and entrepreneurs that underpin this ecosystem risk falling between the cracks in light of the current crisis, and we risk to lose the efforts of the past decade. What has the EIT Inner Energy done to ensure that these startups are supported and that the past efforts will be sustained? Over to you, Elena. We cannot hear you.
Hello? So thank you very much, Antonetta, for this kind introduction. And for us, it's a great honor to be here in the European Research and Innovation Days. As you have mentioned, Europe has invested a lot on creating an ecosystem for this kind of sustainable energy startups, and something that we were witnessing at the moment of the crisis was that we were focused to save that efforts. So, what we have done in the framework of the COVID. The first thing is that we have been a trusted and patient impact investor, and what we have done is what most of the investors in our area have done, which is focus to save the portfolio. And this is very, very relevant because imagine that we have all these companies, these ventures, these innovative cases, and suddenly the COVID comes. It was a surprise for everybody and also for them. So the COVID has put on hold the expected sales. They put on hold capital increases. They put on hold the even previous commercial agreements. And that moment to act was at that moment, because for earlier stage startups, for innovative cases, the time and the speed was really crucial. So we took a very, let's say, practical approach. So during the first 3 weeks, we were just contacting more than 300 assets. This was about 2,000 phone calls and telcos in order to identify what was the impact of the COVID, of this crisis, in their business plans, in the in their companies. And then we identified that among those, 80 of them could have a moderate or a great impact on it. So we were focused during all this time to solve and to help them and to give them a resilience in order to cope in this situation, unprecedented times. So for instance, if we can put the slide that we have provided, different things that we have done is that, for instance, in the case of companies like Green, what we wanted was to assure and to foster the sales. And then we put into work our sales teams in order to support this young company that it is devoted to the sludge treatment so that they could close real commercial commitment with customers. Another aspect was to be able to meet previous commercial agreements, because some of our ventures have supply chains in different places on the world, and due to the logistics that had suffered a lot, especially the ones that they have part of the supply chain in other companies so far away. And that is something that we have to help them to find suppliers and to find substitutes and to strengthen the supply chain. And finally, one interesting thing was that they had also impact on capital increases. So we have to provide them and help them to facilitate this access to funding, private and public. And in that sense, as Antonetta has mentioned before, it has been really crucial, the EIT Crisis Response Initiative, mobilizing this 60 million and mobilizing it in a very speed way. And I will stress that the speed in this context is really, really crucial. But besides that, fostering the resilience of those ventures, the interesting thing was that we had to secure previous efforts in order to foster the ecosystem. And that is why we go on with the business as usual, going on supporting companies like Principal Power, that it has today the first floating wind farm in continental Europe, which is fully operational in Portugal. Or we have been going on supporting the European Battery Alliance, the European battery supply chain, supporting Northvolt, which was the first unicorn that we have last year, and also, and these are good news, supporting the creation of another gigafactory, which is called Vercor in France, together with Schneider Electric. So this is important because it's not only giving resilience. And then the final idea that I would like to put across is that now we have a challenge, now which is the next step, which is the next generation EU. And here we have really a great environment, a great contextual aspect, which is that Europe has decided to put the climate change in the center and fostering and supporting. But one of the important things is the implementation. And we need this support, this funding that it is reaching to secure that it goes to the proper places and in a speed. And that is why in EIT Inner Energy now we are very focusing on supporting, on being active business partners, so that this happen. And the new Green Deal, as it has been mentioned before, it's in the core of what the activities that we're doing.
Okay, thank you very much, Helena. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for your presentation and
yes.
Giving very, very concrete examples and first-hand experience of how you have helped companies and startups. As we don't have much time, while we have received a number of very interesting questions from Slido, from our viewers and participants, I would suggest that we move directly to these questions, and I would be very grateful if you can keep your answers really short and concise. And I will start with the first one. Kirsten, I think it will be a very interesting question to you. How can KICs contribute to a more diffused entrepreneurial ecosystem spanning not just in urban areas, but also across rural and mountain areas? And of course, this question could be later answered by the other panelists. Kirsten, over to you.
Thank you very much, Antoinette. Yes, a number of the initiatives that we are working on are in both specific startups, but also broader education and entrepreneurial initiatives are absolutely spanning into rural, or are derived and grounded in rural areas. I can think particularly about an example of working in the Dolomites, where there is a set of initiatives that are building on the learnings from some of the really significant catastrophic storms that took place relatively recently, and have brought together a number of different actors from agricultural sectors, from local communities, from small towns, and from forestry industry and councils and regional governments to try to understand what kinds of innovations can be used to create greater resilience in the face of future storms and future climate change impacts from drought, from warming, from changes in disease patterns and impacts on agriculture, and how can that be linked to educational initiatives to help people prepare for a greater degree of resilience and for different skills and different jobs, also leveraging alternative technologies, planting mechanisms, technologies around climate smart agriculture, water management, waste management, and so on. So there are a significant number of initiatives, particularly connecting into regional transformation, that are bringing together single point solutions in the form of technology changes, information architecture, and a different way of leveraging that, also drawing down through the Copernicus project on European satellite information, drawing down on social change, participatory ownership and governance of changes in agricultural practices, and then connecting that through to an overall capability and capacity building in terms of the way in which innovation can feed into new jobs and new skills.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. As we don't have much time, indeed, I would like to ask you to keep the answers short. And Andy, I have a question to you. Which will be the main goal of climate-friendly food systems and diets? Could you please very shortly answer this very interesting question?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the main goals will be to reduce the impact of the food system on the environment. And there are many different factors that make an impact, right? So, for example, agriculture is known to have about a 25% contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. There's also food waste and food loss. If you can imagine that 1/3 of all food gets wasted or lost in the process from farm to fork. So it's as if you had a production line of cars where every third car gets thrown away. So the idea is to come up with innovations that help to reduce waste and also the effect of on the environment. So one example of that would be we have some a startup that has a product that allows you to extend the shelf life of certain products by the sheer fact that most of the products get thrown away at the end of the expiration date on the package. But most of the time, all of the products haven't been exposed to temperatures and environmental effects so that they can actually still keep being used. And several studies tell us that if you can extend the shelf life or use life of food products by 2 days, you could reduce food waste by 50%. So it's a very strong impact. And again, we have one of those scale-ups in our Rising Food Stars Association that makes that happen. So that's just one example. Another one could be also one of our project consortiums worked on a label that can tell you when you go to the supermarket. Now, you know the Nutri-Score, so to know how healthy a product is. This team put together a label called the Nutri-Score, which helps you to understand what the environmental footprint is of products that you have. For example, if you buy an avocado that comes in from far away in February, so like from Mexico, for example, that has a much higher impact. So there are many factors that help us to reduce the impact that the food systems and diets would have on the environment.
Thank you very much, Andy. And two final questions. First to Bernd. Bernd, how do you actually join this ecosystem of innovation managed by the EIT KICs based on your experience with the EIT Raw Materials? This is a very practical question, if you can give some insights.
Okay, I mean, what we are doing, the ecosystem.
But please keep the answers really very short, as we are really running out of time. Thank you.
Okay, no, we are clearly addressing this by also joining forces and creating Raw Materials Alliance in Europe, where we are addressing innovation, education, and business creation. There is this very strong need in the European network, and I think we have common interest from the industry as well as from the policy side to address those topics. And we have been setting up, and we will be launching the Raw Materials Alliance by the end of this month to provide also opportunities here to the industry as well as to the whole stakeholders community in order to pre-address and proactively act on the forthcoming supply-demand gaps that we clearly see here in the industry, and to maintain employment as well as competitiveness for the European ecosystems.
Thank you very much, Bernd. And I have a question also for Elena, though this is a question which can be answered by the other panelists if it is kept very short. How ready are we for the Green Deal, and how inclusive will it be, considering that the expected impacts are very high? Elena, can you try?
I think that we are ready for the Green Deal. I think that Europe, for many reasons, we are prepared. First, because we have the technology, we have really innovative companies that they are really presenting breakthroughs. The other thing is because in Europe, we have been taking a lot of care about the ecosystem. So it's not only the startups, but we have been putting a lot of efforts in the last years to create that all the agents are there. And this is an unprecedented thing, because the fact that the research, the education, the industry, and also the investors are working together in around this ecosystem and around the KICs is something that we should be proud, because you cannot find it in many places managed in this way. Also, we have the legislation and the regulation prepared for that. I mean, in other countries, in other states, I mean, and I don't want to mention nobody, but they are just contemplating, with the sentence saying, okay, this will become cooler. In Europe, we are putting the Green Deal in the center of it. And I think that we have to be proud, and then this means that we are ready and we have to go for it.
Thank you very much, Elena. I have a very, very final question to all of you, if you can really keep it to 1 or 2 words. And this is how the EIT community can be more effectively engaged in the recovery funding and the Green Deal actions, having in mind all the concrete examples that you've already given of how you're already contributing. Kirsten, what else could be more effectively done?
I think the most important thing is, building off the last comments, is to leverage the network and the trust established amongst innovators across Europe through the networks and the ecosystems of the KICs, and to ensure that that trust is leveraged to deploy the funding as quickly as possible and as close as possible in practical solutions to the ground. EIT as a community represents more than 2,000 organizations. If you start to count in and include the alumni, this begins to get to tens and hundreds of thousands. And we are operating across the entire European community. So there are deep networks of trust and relationship, and a constantly expanding community. Speaking for Climate, we are expanding partnership 25% every year on year. And so there is really an opportunity.
Sorry, because I would like to give also the opportunity of the other panelists very briefly to say in 1 or 2 words, if you can complement what Kirsten already said about the EIT community. Bernd, would you like to have 1 or 2 words before we finish?
Yeah, sure. To me, one is clearly expand the regional involvement and proactively addressing opportunities across the ecosystems. I think that's what it's very much about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Antti?
Yes, I believe that it's important for us to collaborate much more with the member states. So many of the states already have an agenda, a food systems agenda that's very much aligned with our own and with the Green Deal. So working with the member states is key.
Thank you. One final word, Elena, for you, but keep it only to 1 word.
Speed and agility.
Speed. Thank you very much. So allow me once again to warmly thank all our speakers today for their very insightful, interesting presentations, for this very interesting discussion, as well as to all participants for having been with us today and for the very interesting questions. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.